The fifth order of the day is commencement of debate on the general principle of a bill for an act to provide for the compulsory teaching of vocational studies in the syllabuses of secondary schools in Nigeria and for related matters, standing in the name of Honorable Joseph Bello. Honorable members will recall that the bill was read the first time on Tuesday, 2nd July 2020, and I invite Honorable Bello to move that the bill be now read a second time.
I am Honorable Engineer Joseph Asukubelo, and I represent the great people of Adavi, Okehi Federal Constituency. I am from Kogi State. I rise to move that a bill for an act to provide for the compulsory teaching of vocational studies in syllabuses of secondary schools in Nigeria and other related matters be read the second time. I so move.
I represent the good people of Asa Federal Constituency. Mr. Speaker, I'm from Ebonyi State. I rise to second the motion, moved by my colleagues, that the bill should be read for second reading. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What happened? They didn't want you to second the bill? What was going on? Honorable Bello, 2 minutes.
Dear colleagues, I remain Honorable Engineer Joseph Bello, representing the great people of Adavi, Okehi Federal Constituency of Kogi State. Amen. Mr. Speaker, my dear colleagues, over the years, the rate of unemployment, especially of our teeming young population, is alarming and worrisome. For example, data for the second quarter of 2020 from the National Bureau of Statistics revealed that about 21.7 million Nigerians are unemployed, out of which a staggering 13.9 of them are youths within the ages of 15 to 24 years. Mr. Speaker, my dear colleagues, let's take a pause, take a minute to evaluate these figures. Sweden, Germany, Greece, and Belgium all have population less than 13 million. So in essence, what we're trying to say is this: we have a country of unemployed youth within our nation. Sadly, these statistics are predicted to grow even worse as the worsening state of insecurity, the dwindling oil prices, and the dire consequences of COVID-19 pandemic continues to take a toll on our economy. Mr. Speaker, one of the often mentioned reasons for high rates of unemployment, youth unemployment in the country, is our educational system, which experts say is designed to produce graduates for white-collar jobs, jobs that are readily available or that are not enough to satisfy the population of teeming youth that we have. And this educational system, rather than it doesn't make them become entrepreneurs or employers of labor. Unfortunately, this has led to unabated poverty, which in turn has spiked widespread insecurities such as terrorism, kidnapping, robbery, and other violent crimes across the country. We all know the saying, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. This dire situation, my dear colleagues, require that the Parliament, this People's Parliament, should urgently come up with legislative instruments that will fine-tune our educational system. And this is what this bill, before this Hello Chamber, seeks to do. The bill, in essence, seeks to mainstream the study of vocational subjects, such as carpentry, fashion design, makeup, catering, event planning, just to mention a few, into our core educational system, from the GS level to the SS level, in such a way as to transform all our secondary schools into skill acquisition centers. And by doing so, my colleagues will be catching them young. In other words, it is preparing our young people for employment in the workplace by equipping them early enough with the right mindset, as well as with the right job-specific and employability skills, which will connect them with the business community, either as workers or as entrepreneurs and small business owners. My dear colleagues, this is the globally proven route because virtually every thriving economy world over, like the US, the China, India, their economy is anchored and sustained by small businesses and entrepreneurial spirit. One sure foundation for that to happen is to fully integrate the vocational training into the core educational system of our economy. In essence, Mr. Speaker, my dear colleagues, this bill I'm proposing before us today, when passed, will ensure that our teeming youths are readily employable, they will gain invaluable entrepreneurship skills, and ultimately become, which is the most important part, self-reliant. If we can achieve this, my dear colleagues, this will not only lower the unemployment rate, it will reduce the poverty levels in Nigeria, youth restiveness, it will reduce insecurity and crimes across our country. It will also stimulate the social economic growth and development of the country. So what this bill intends to do is to make the development and teaching of vocational subjects compulsory for secondary school across the country, be it public or private. To make it mandatory for every secondary school graduate to have a credit pass in at least one vocational subject as prerequisite for further studies in higher institutions in Nigeria. This bill also seeks to produce a legislative instrument that will back the efforts and policies of government, especially with regards to the implementation of national vocational education and training policies. And in conclusion, my dear colleagues, let me quote a former US Senator, Conrad Barnes, and he said, "Vocational education programs have made a real difference in the lives of young people nationwide. They build self-confidence, leadership skills by allowing students to utilize their unique gifts and talent." And with this in mind, Mr. Speaker, my dear colleagues, I crave your indulgence that this bill be read the second time. I so submit.
I have the intention of speaking against the bill after I have gotten a clarification from the sponsor of the bill. If you look at the narration of the bill, that is a bill for an act to provide the compulsory teaching of vocational studies in the syllabuses of secondary school in Nigeria and for related matters. Mr. Speaker, what I need clarification here is, by definition, and as the name suggests, vocational studies are any knowledge or skills acquired during vacations. We have this thing in the past. The only thing now is not active in our various constituencies because of government neglect of such vocational studies. What is actually happening, or what actually happened in the past, sir, is that during vacation, instead of students of secondary schools and other related institutions to go around doing something else that is not in line with the expectation of the society, they can go to the vocational schools and acquire knowledge so that at the end of the period, even if they have not gotten a white-collar job, they can venture into what they have acquired. Another thing, no, I understand. I just need to...
No. Hold on, honorable colleagues. No, I think there's a little misunderstanding.
Yes.
Because you're thinking of schools, vacation schools, when they're in vacation. But this is vocation. I think that's the mistake.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a mistake. Vocation is, less formal education.
Yes.
For skilled workers, skills acquisition.
That is why I said I just
Education.
need clarification. So you pass the question. You move the question. Thank you.
Yeah. I think that's the clarification. It's vocational schools as opposed to schools you go during vacation. Yes. I think that's the clarification.
Honorable Osai Nicholas Osai. I represent local Kwani Federal Constituency of Delta State. I want to commend my honorable colleagues for bringing this particular bill. It's a bill that impacts skills and also other academics endeavor on our children. But when looking at the constitutional provision of this kind of items, I refer, Mr. Speaker, to the concurrent list, item 28, item 29, and item 30, because probably we can resolve that at committee stage. Why I'm bringing this issue is this. The item listed in item 29 of the concurrent list empower the state and the federal government to establish certain institutions, both on secondary. But you go to item 30, he gives state power on vocational education. So my question is that how do we now align both? Probably at the committee stage, we could be able to address that concern. But Mr. Speaker, when you looked at item 30 of the concurrent list, I see it as a power conferred on states to create vocational institutions. But whether the National Assembly can also legislate on it is an issue that can be resolved at the committee stage when public hearing is being carried out. So at this stage, I will urge the honorable colleagues to allow it stay through to the committee stage, where probably experts can provide solutions to address those concerns. I rest my case, Mr. Speaker. Honorable colleagues, I take item 28 first. We say the power conferred on National Assembly under paragraph 27 of this item shall include power to establish an institution for the purpose of university, post-primary technological, or professional education. Now, 29. Subject as herein provided, House of Assembly shall have power to make laws for the state with respect to the establishment of an institution for purposes of university, technological, or professional education. And it went to 28 to also address House of Assembly. And I went to 30 to address House of Assembly. It said nothing in the foregoing paragraph, which is the 29, of this item shall be construed so as to limit the power of a House of Assembly to make laws for the state with respect of technical, vocational, post-primary. So added item to the House of Assembly, or other form of education, including the establishment of institution for the pursuit of such education. Mr. Speaker, my issue is this. Probably at this stage, we should allow this bill to stay through to committee level. We're expert, because we do what is called bill analysis. At the committee hearing, we talked about bill analysis. And under the issues of bill analysis, you are bringing experts to be able to separate which power confers to the state House of Assembly and which power is domiciled for the National Assembly to look into. And that's the essence of conducting a public
Honorable Osai, so you are reading from concurrent means is that both the federal and the state can legislate. So the fact that it gives the state assembly the powers, what it says is that it does not preclude the federal government for it's like LASU, for instance, Lagos State University. It does not preclude the federal from establishing its own university. There's no contradiction there whatsoever.
I agree, Mr. Speaker. But if the Constitution is particular in a certain aspect, that means it gives a limitation. I know that concurrent list is both the National Assembly and the House of Assembly can legislate on it. But when Constitution go further, to deal with such issues, particular, by mentioning House of Assembly, particular, that means it restricts the National Assembly from going into and diving into such areas. That's how the Constitution is.
It doesn't restrict the National Assembly, it's the State Assembly from, that's what it says. So they can both work on vocational schools together.
There's a provision that where states make laws, national make law, the law of national precedes supersedes that of the state.
And there's a doctrine called covering the field. If the federal does something before the state, then you've already covered the field. It's called conflict of laws. Yes, and there's something called covering the field. Yes, Honorable, I wonder.
Mr. Speaker, I've listened attentively to the arguments being canvassed in support and also against the bill. Mr. Speaker, no doubt the intent, the spirit, and purpose of the author of this bill is laudable. Teaching vocational education, which we very much need in this country, vocational and not theoretical education. But Mr. Speaker, I need to say that vocational education is much needed in this country than most of the degrees on mere cosmetic courses. Mr. Speaker, I once said on this floor of this house that the Chinese had to downgrade 600 universities and turn them to polytechnics, where technical vocational courses were being taught. Mr. Speaker, but we are unfortunately found ourselves with constitutional barbed wires surrounding us. I looked at the bill, well set out, good intendments. May I ask you, can we compel a private school that came out to teach only grammar to do vocational courses? You can do that with government schools, sir. Mr. Speaker, you can't compel somebody who set out a school, French, Nigerian Institute, college, or whatever, to do technical education. It's choice. The Constitution guarantees their fundamental right, what knowledge to seek. I'm in agreement that we should pursue technical education. I'm able to say that we should establish more vocational colleges. What has happened to our trade test? What has happened to all those whatnot? We should revive them. So what I'm trying to say, this is a policy matter that should be domiciled with the Federal Ministry of Education on curriculum matters, where from time to time we have a subsidiary legislation which empowers the Ministry of Education to proclaim on curriculum issues. But coming to put a law that every school must teach AYZ will be overreaching, Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues. It's a matter of policy. If I set up now to do a school, a secondary school, that will only do English and mathematics, simplicity, and I charge $1 million, whosoever fees are coming to pay will pay, like we witness. But telling them that they must add vocational courses to it, only government schools can be even asked to. And you don't do a law just because of some momentary gaps. You can use policy instruments to correct it. I'm of the view that the author of this bill should do legislative work to refer to say government schools should, am I protected? I'm of the view that we should say government view, or alternatively, there are a way of doing things. Government can provide incentive for whichever private school that wants to do vocational courses. But you can't mandatorily, you are a lawyer, Mr. Speaker, you can't mandatorily ask me, a private school proprietor, to have a certain course. You can say, for any school who wants to do so vocational courses,
will set you up. But coming here to do, let us not do a bill somebody can challenge successfully in court who can't breach it. I'm of the view that proper legislative work should be done in this. So I will pass a bill that can stand the test of time. That is what I want to add in it. Let's have a time to refresh this bill and add value to it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable. I want to raise a very interesting proposition. But let me ask, Honorable Abonte, can you make education itself compulsory? Answer to the question. I'm just asking. It's a rhetorical question.
Yes, you can make education compulsory, but a pattern of education. You cannot make, for example, pornography compulsory. You cannot. It's education. You cannot.
The reason why I ask is because you have pegged your argument under the freedom for anybody to decide, I don't want to teach this, I don't want to teach that. So therefore, one can have a freedom to say, I don't want to educate, I don't want to be educated. But it's an interesting proposition. I think Honorable Johnson had yes.
And respected colleagues, I am Honorable Johnson Agwagide Oguma. I represent all the people of the Federal Constituency. I want to first and foremost say that I want to thank the sponsor of this bill. This bill is apt and it's a kind of bill that we need at this period. What the sponsor of this bill has said is, Speaker, that we should give opportunity, compulsory opportunity, to all our students, whether private, public, federal, state. Let them have opportunity of making use of their intellectual comparative advantage in an area. It's not everybody that goes to secondary school that will go to university. The issue now is that if you have opportunity of learning a trade while in school.
Honorable Johnson, Honorable Abonta's argument is not don't give them opportunity. His argument is that you can give them opportunity, but you cannot compel them.
Okay.
That's his argument.
Mr. Speaker, what I'm saying in effect is that there is SS1, JS1 to JS3. The SS1 to SS3. There are subjects that you do from JS1 to JS3. The same subjects are not compulsory for you from SS1 to SS3. Like some of us, we took some subjects when we were starting. As you go along, you will discover that whether you have interest in that area, but there is no student in Nigeria that will not have interest in one vocational study or the other. Let us use this bill to give them opportunity of learning one thing, an area that they have interest. It can be compulsory. Is mathematics not compulsory? Historians, they do mathematics and it's not useful to them. The arts students, they do mathematics in secondary school. It's not useful to them, but it's compulsory and they go through it. So it is an opportunity to give opportunity to our children to learn one trade on the other. So along the line, they'll be useful to themselves. This bill, Mr. Speaker, it is very, very important. It will save so many things in this country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Nolly.
My name is Nolly Naji. I represent Nkanu East West Federal Constituency from Enugu State. Mr. Speaker, I believe that we are not supposed to force anybody to learn any skill, but also my own suggestion is that instead of doing it at the secondary school level, we can also make it a must that once you finish secondary school, before you enter university, you can do 2 years vocational skill, or I'm coming, please, I'm coming. Or the second one, we can convert NYSC for purpose of vocational studies. Option. It's an option. We can do NYSC instead of telling people to learn vocation in secondary school. We can use NYSC. That 1 year of NYSC, we can convert it to vocational learning, studies. That's my suggestion, sir.
Akiolu.
Honorable colleagues, my name is Benjamin Bemzondo. I speak for the people of Makudi Guma. I also represent a teeming unemployed youth that this bill seeks to assist. Right Honorable Speaker, honorable colleagues, when you do one thing over and over and you don't get a result, what you do is that you change strategy. As a nation, one of our major challenges is that of unemployment. And what this bill seeks to address is to address unemployment. Right Honorable Speaker, honorable colleagues, there is no country in the world that government can even provide up to 25% of the employable population. With this bill, it will now make it compulsory for your 6 years in the secondary school to learn at least a skill, which is what is no longer available. Most of our technical schools are now dying and they are no longer in use. Government is no longer funding them. But with this bill, technical education will now be funded and it will receive the necessary legislative backing. I plead with you, honorable colleagues. We face insecurity because our youth are not engaged. Today, when you go to most of the vocational discipline, what you see there are children of less privilege. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, every holiday I send my children to go learn a skill, at least for 2 weeks, because they are not available in their schools. I plead with you to please lend a voice to this very fine legislation so that we can allow it pass and see to it that most of our youth have a skill that can keep them going. Right Honorable Speaker, I was a photographer in the university, and that was the skill that kept me paying my fee and even others. As I speak to you today, that photography stand still exists in Bayero University, Kano today. A lot of people have passed through that same skill. Today, tell me which school in Nigeria teaches photography at the secondary level. It is not done. Most of us learn one art skill or the other, welding and fabrication, at secondary school level. Where is it today? I plead with you people. This is one legislation that will stand us out and seeing us work for the youth of this nation. I lend my voice to this very wonderful legislation. I don't want to call anybody speaking this as anti-youth. Just like we didn't oppose the legislation for women, let us not oppose this legislation. Thank you so much and God bless you all.
Professor Julius Sionvere, Owan Federal Constituency, Edo State. I believe that on reflection, given the circumstances in which we find ourselves in this country today, given the issues we discussed just here yesterday, and what my committee has seen going around parts of the country on oversight, this bill, if properly implemented, may save us from the looming doom. Sir, UBEC is building in every state a school for basic education, or for vocational education. Most governors just abandon the buildings. There is one in my local government, built 3 years ago, handed over to the state government, 14 buildings. It has not been utilized for anything. It's supposed to be a school for vocational education at the basic level. And this is being replicated all over the country. This bill, with the weight of law, and just as my very good friend, comrade, and compatriot, Honorable Ben Uzondu just explained, it will save this country a lot of problems. Youth corpers are now going to learn baking, dressmaking, cooking, after going through the university. These are graduates. So I believe, sir, that this is very important. It is part of the culture of technical vocation education training, TVET, that most nations in the world are now turning to as a way of resolving issues of unemployment, of urban restlessness, of insecurity, and of violence in the peri-urban areas. So I think we should support it. And when it gets to committee, we'll fine-tune it. We'll bring in the National Education Research Development Council, NERDC, to help us work out the modalities. With one warning, sir, my final word. As usual, I was just telling Honorable Gary, when this bill is passed, they will implement it in the capital city. You will not see anything in the rural areas. This is the tradition, the style of governments across this country. So this House must be ready to work on this bill in such a way that it will protect the majority of our people that are in the villages so they benefit from this kind of initiative. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable colleagues. I must say, Honorable Abond raised an interesting legal point, but it's a gray area, and like the Ninth Assembly is known for, we promised ourselves to start thinking outside the box. We need to look at this in the context of unemployment, like Honorable Ben rightly pointed out. Every day we all do empowerment programs in our constituencies to teach this trade, teach that trade. There's no point doing that if we do not have vocational courses to teach these children. So I'll just put the question. Those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Ayes have it.
Syllabuses of secondary schools in Nigeria and for related matters, second reading.